Chapter 8, Spirit Week. I forgave Punky for embarrassing me, but I couldn't forgive myself for running away from Tree. What would I say if I saw him again? My dinner was burning? My beeper beeped and I had to make a call? As I walked to school on Monday, I thought how Tree and Avenel were a whole lot nicer than any other kids I'd run into in Tanglenook. Maybe they had to be if they wanted to fit in with the crowd. I wondered what it would be like to be poor, to wear faded clothes and that hadn't been bought that way, and to have your father in jail. When I got to school and saw all the posters and blue and white streamers in the hall, I remembered it was Spirit Week. Students were supposed to dress up in different kinds of costumes each day to show support for the football team. Today was Hawaiian Day, and nearly everyone was wearing wild-flowered shirts, sunglasses, and floppy straw hats. In English, first hour, when all the kids in Hawaiian clothes stood up to be counted, no one noticed that I wasn't in costume. How could they? I asked myself. I'm invisible. Anyway, they were all too interested in Cindy Martin, who was wearing a silk flower in her hair and dancing the hula in a grass skirt. Next, I had study hall, which seemed like a terrible waste. Who needed a study hall in second hour? Then I remembered promising Avenel I'd do my math in study hall from now on. Today's assignment was finished, so I'd start tomorrow. I sat daydreaming about Silver Dollar City. It was one of the few places where I didn't have to worry about people making fun of Punky. Maybe it was because they were so busy gawking at the sights, they were too busy to gawk at anything else. I doodled in my notebook, listing things I most wanted to see and do on Saturday, like watch the master woodcarver and ride the roller coaster called Fire in the Hole. When the bell rang, I went to my locker and exchanged the notebook for a sketch pad. Before I knew it, I was moseying toward the water fountain in the 9th grade hallway, peeking in every classroom as I passed. What would I do if I spotted Tree or he spotted me? Would he even recognize me, since I washed and blow-dried my hair and styled it with a curling iron? When I reached the fountain, I still hadn't found Tree, so I took a quick drink and hurried back the other way. I must have looked like an owl, I thought, the way I was twisting my head from side to side. I smiled at the mental image, an owl looking for a tree. I expected to see Avenel in art class, but I didn't expect to see her in Hawaiian clothes. She was wearing what looked like a flowery maternity dress, all wadded up around her waist with a belt. "Hi, Del Rita," she said eagerly. I could tell by her expression that she wished she hadn't dressed up like that for school. "Hi," I said, my voice squeaky, because she was the first person who had spoken to me since I'd walked into the building. The way other kids ignored her that hour gave me an odd sense of relief. At least I wouldn't have to worry about her blabbing to anybody about Punky. At lunchtime, I sat alone in my usual spot and toyed with my poor man's casserole. How the cooks could take perfectly good beef and vegetables and stir them up in a tasteless mess was beyond me. I wondered if they had special training in how to turn school food into glue. "Does it taste as bad as it looks?" asked Avenel, setting her tray down and pulling out her chair across from me. "I don't know. I've been afraid to try it." "I think I'll stick with the Jell-O and the bread and butter," Avenel said as she unwrapped a straw and stuck it in her milk. I felt suddenly bashful, as if she'd know somehow that I'd been in the ninth grade hallway looking for her brother. Concentrating on the casserole, I chased it around on my tray. Avenel broke the silence by saying, "How'd you get the name Del Rita?" Nobody had ever asked me that before, so I hadn't dreamed up a fancy explanation. I decided to tell the truth and hoped she wouldn't laugh like a hyena right here in the cafeteria. It's a combination of my grandparents' names, Delbert and Margarita. Avenel didn't laugh. She looked thoughtful and said, "That's neat. When I came to this school, it seemed like all the girls have cutesy names spelled with an I. Cindy, Debbie, Tammy, Bobby. So when Miss Morley said I was supposed to share a math book with Delrita Jensen, I wanted to jump up and holler, 'Hooray!' My middle name's Jolena, after my other set of grandparents. What's yours?" I asked, realizing too late that I was encouraging the conversation. "Thurston." "Thurston?" "My mom's maiden name." Avenel started giggling and said, "There's not a whole lot we can do with names like ours." "You could go by Nellie. Nellie with an I." "No, I've been that route. In St. Louis, kids called me Nellie Belly. I even tried Nell, and they called me Nell's Bells." I grinned as she rattled on. "My mom goes for the old-fashioned names. Trezane, Avenel, Randolph, Edward, Gilberta, and Gordon. Even the new baby will be named Chandler or Elmira." Wrinkling her nose, she said, "Aren't those awful?" "There's a city in New York called Elmira." "Don't tell my mom that," said Avenel. In spite of myself, I laughed. Elmira, New York, Shackelford. That would be a mouthful. All right. Avenel laughed too, but then she looked serious. Trees named after our dad, but I think my mom gave all of us important sounding names so we'd live up to them. You know, make something out of ourselves. I thought about the Shacklefords living in that shabby house while they waited for their dad to get out of jail, and instantly I felt sorry for the whole family. Avenel poked at her jello with a spoon and said, "You sure make a hit with my sister. She keeps talking about Velveeta giving her a whistle." "It wasn't any big deal." "It was to her. It was something brand new and shiny for a change." She paused a moment before going on. "Since you've seen where we live, you might as well know the rest of the Shackelford saga." I glanced sharply at her. She was going to tell me that her dad was in jail? "We're going to get old clothes from the welfare office and handouts from the government, but it's not very often that somebody gives us something brand new just to be nice. Even at Christmas time, we get used toys that have been fixed up and painted." I didn't want to hear any more of this depressing story, but I didn't know how to stop her. This was private information, the kind you'd tell only to your best friend, and Avenel and I barely knew each other. Besides that, if she reported all this bad stuff about her own family, what would she report to other people about mine? Avenel's face was so white that her freckles seemed to stand up by themselves, and her fingers were ripping a paper napkin to shreds. Finally, she gave me a weak smile and said, "I guess you're wondering why I'm telling you all this. In St. Louis, I was really backward around other people because of certain things. When we moved here, I tried hard to be different, more outgoing. Friday afternoon, when you didn't want to talk, I thought it was because of me. Now I know It was because of that little man who was with you at church. You were trying to hide him, weren't you? No. Yes. Oh, I don't know, I mumbled, staring at the table. Punky's my uncle. He lives with us. He he's different. He was funny. On the way home, we laughed about him telling Mom she's fat. He's right, you know. She has to tape a chip over her belly button to keep it from poking through her clothes. So they had laughed at Punky after all. I felt strangely disappointed. Avenel gave a deep sigh. All families have secrets. I guess some of us just have worse secrets than others. Avenel ate lunch with me every day that week. Since we had PE fourth hour and lunch right after that, it worked out that we were walking together to the cafeteria anyway. She didn't mention Punky again, so I just let her chatter on and nodded in the appropriate places. She talked mostly about the outfits the kids were wearing to school. Today was Pajama Day, followed by Backward Day, Movie Star Day, and Opposite Sex Day. Some of the costumes were downright ridiculous, and it was a relief to go home, where everyone was normal, where we hid the shampoo and had horn bones behind the TV. By Friday, it was obvious that no one was learning anything in classes, and the whole school was wound up tight over the big game. At the afternoon pep rally, I was already pinned in on the bleachers when Avenel came into the gym, wearing Tree's football jersey, which was about 14 sizes too big for her. She looked small and forlorn as she tried to find a seat. The coach introduced the football players, and they lumbered into the gym floor in makeup and jewelry and pillow-stuffed gowns. For once, I was one of the crowd, laughing out loud with my classmates, especially at Tree in a feathery tent dress, tottering along in high heels. When the last bell rang and everyone swarmed out of the building, storm clouds boiled in the sky, and thunder rumbled from west to east like low-flying jets. The air, which had hung hot and heavy in the classrooms all afternoon, suddenly turned cold, as if someone had opened a giant refrigerator. Since I didn't have a jacket, I hoped I could beat the rain. I was trying to decide whether to detour or wait for the buses to move when someone caught my arm and asked, Are you coming to the game? I looked around and saw a Tree. You mean you'll play even if it rains? Sure, he said. Coach says it'll make men out of us. That struck me as hilarious. Coming from a boy whose eyelids were glistening with silver makeup and whose cheeks were smeared with rouge, I started laughing and couldn't stop. Tree laughed too, a deep, rumbly sound that reminded me of rocks being tossed in a barrel. Kids have been telling me all day that I look funny, but nobody got hysterical over it, he said. I held my sides as the laughter slowly bubbled down into giggles. At last I managed to gasp. You really could pass for Ronald McDonald. Tree gave me a sheepish grin. I guess I should be offended, but I'm not. How about it? Are you coming to the game? The laughter left me as quick as it came. For some strange reason, I did want to watch him play football. I wanted to scream and yell for Trezane Shackelford and the Tanglenook Wildcats, but I wouldn't go. Tree was watching me, waiting for an answer. I didn't know how to tell him no. He wouldn't understand what it was like to go someplace alone, to sit in a crowd with no one to talk to. I had had enough of that to last a lifetime, and I'd never forget riding a jam-packed bus on a field trip in May and having a whole seat to myself. At last, I thought of an excuse. I can't be out that late, I said. We're leaving early in the morning for Silver Dollar City. Oh, he said, that's great. I've always wanted to go there. You girls are going to get wet, teased Avenel, coming up behind us. Give me a break, moaned her brother. I could have kicked myself. Why hadn't I thought to ask Avenel to go with me to the game? Fat raindrops plopped onto my cheek and rolled down my notebook. I glanced up as the drops came faster and shards of lightning split the sky, close enough to make me run for cover any other time. Come on, yelled Tree, before we get soaked. He hobbled toward the school as fast as he could go in his high heels. Avenel and I started after him, but then I heard a car horn and looked back. My mom had pulled her station wagon into the spot the buses had just left, and she was hollering for us to jump in. I hesitated for a second because Punky was with her in the front seat, and he was crying. What would Tree and Avenel think of him being scared of the rain? Hurry, Del Rita, Mom called. You other kids, too. I'll take you home. Avenel and Tree didn't wait to be asked again. They ran for the car and clambered in the back seat. There was nothing for me to do but crawl in beside Avenel. Punky forgot his fears for a moment when he saw Tree dressed like a girl. He turned around and said, You're a clown! I know, agreed Tree. Del Rita just told me I look like Ronald McDonald. Del Rita, Mom said, catching my eye in the rearview mirror as she shifted the car into gear. I knew what she was thinking. No wonder you don't have any friends. It's all right, said Tree. I asked for it coming into school in this get-up. Coach insisted the whole team dress up for Spirit Week. Mom was still eyeing me in the mirror. Here it was Friday, and I hadn't even mentioned Spirit Week. She stopped at a red light and said, I was glad to see your family at church on Sunday. We liked it, said Tree. It's a lot smaller than the one we went to in St. Louis. The rain started pouring down as the light changed, and Mom turned the windshield wipers on full blast. With big tears rolling down his cheeks, Punky looked back at me and said, Call the news! They don't want no rain! I didn't say anything, so when the sky flickered with lightning, Punky shivered and said again, Call the news! I could feel the questioning stares of Tree and Avenel, but right now, I couldn't worry about them. Reaching across to pat Punky on my shoulder, I said, I can't. I don't have a phone. Tree and Avenel exchanged glasses, and Mom explained, Punky thinks Del Rita can call the weather and shut off the rain. In fact, he thinks she can do just about anything. Bertie would believe that, said Tree with a chuckle. Bertie was in my class last Sunday, said Mom. She's quite a little talker. What did she talk about? Avenel asked. Everything. She told me she swallowed a bolt and had to go to the hospital, and she said she had a chicken named Henrietta, but it got stolen. Oh, said Avenel, obviously relieved. I'm curious about the bolt, Mom went on. Did she have to have surgery? No, answered Tree. His face lit up with a grin. The doctor said to think of it as trial or tribulation. This, too, shall pass. Mom chuckled at the doctor's joke, and I caught myself smiling. Soon Mom turned off at McDonald's, and Tree directed her to the right house. He got out of the car but kept his head ducked inside as he thanked us for the ride and told Punky, Don't worry about the storm. Pretend it's angels shooting fireworks in the sky. He and Avenel ran across the yard, and when they reached the porch, they turned and signaled Punky with their thumbs up. I studied Tree, thinking how he'd been a real gentleman with Punky. He waved at me and disappeared into the house, letting the door slam in his sister's face. Seem like nice kids, Mom was saying as we drove away. I met their mother at church. The poor woman has her hands full with all those children, and another one on the way. I wonder about her husband. Where is he? Where he works? Avenel never said, I replied. Mom wasn't the kind of person who would judge the kids by their parents, so I don't know why I didn't tell her about Mr. Shackelford being in jail. By the time we got home, the rain had stopped, and a watery sun was peeking out from behind the clouds. Punky climbed out of the car, tipped his cowboy hat to the sky, and said, Thank you, DJ. Then, tucking his lunch box under his arm, he headed for the house.